Good morning. The committee will come to order. Before we begin, I'd like to ask unanimous consent that Mr. Ehlers and Mr. Udall, who are not members of the subcommittee, be allowed to participate in today's hearing. Without objection, so ordered. And I recognize myself for an opening statement. Thank you to the panel for coming to share some thoughts about STEM. It's crucial for us as a nation to figure out how to continue to lead in technology, and certainly the basis of that is an effective educational system. I had an opportunity to hear some challenging remarks from David McCullough, the author of one of my favorite books, John Adams, and I'm listening now to 1776. David McCullough said something very interesting to a group of House members. Mr. Udall may have been there. He said, we should eliminate departments of education at colleges and universities. He said that we shouldn't have people that have education degrees teaching. We should have experts in fields teaching. His point of view was that historians should teach history, not education majors. It is a very interesting and provocative thought. He congratulated some work being done at, I believe, at the University of Oklahoma that is headed in that direction. And it starts to sound promising because, you know, when you think of it, when I was in high school, if I'd been taught by somebody who loved math, passionate about math, and understood the interconnectivity of math principles, perhaps I might have caught the math bug. If I had been taught by somebody in science that really loved the subject matter, perhaps I might have caught the bug. As it was, my most memorable teachers were word teachers, English teachers who loved English, and the result was I headed more toward words than to formulas. Now, that has to be balanced. David McCullough's view has to be balanced with another observation. And this I've heard from visiting with research facilities at USC, University of South Carolina, and Clemson University, for example, where the feedback that I've heard from some students is the teacher, the professor, is just boring, as dull as a doornail. Cannot teach, cannot inspire, cannot hold anybody's interest, and in some cases the very difficult question has been raised, I can't understand what he or she is saying. English is a second language for them, and I literally cannot understand what they're saying in class. Now, that being the case, it seems that there's a need for balance somewhere between David McCullough's point of view, which is only scientists should teach science, and the observation that if you don't understand education methods, maybe you can't really teach. And so, as always in life, there's a need for balance. I hope that that's part of what we get at here at this hearing today. And it seems to me it goes to one of the challenges we've got, which is how do you keep students involved in math and science? How do you capture their imagination? I'm a lawyer, and one of the things that I've observed about legal education is that it's pretty interesting because most law is based on cases, and instruction in the law is based on cases. Well, cases are really stories. A story of how Mrs. Palsgraf was standing by the railroad track and something happened and the clock hit her in the noggin, and she sued the railroad company, as I recall. I hope my professor from law school isn't here and remembering that. I realize that I don't remember all the facts of that case, but it's something like that. It's a story. It seems to me one of the challenges of science education, math education, engineering, is making it that interesting. Recently, we on the Science Committee had an opportunity to go to Antarctica. Yesterday, I was writing a thank you note to one of the presenters down there. Truly a master teacher. The fellow held our interest for at least an hour, and really we would have begged him to go on because he truly was a master teacher. Would answer questions, but quickly get back to the subject that he wanted to talk about. Just did a masterful job. If I had had such a teacher in math and science, perhaps I would have continued on and not fallen into the dark side of the law. Well, those are. I hope we get into that. I hope we hear some thoughts today about how do you captivate the imagination and stimulate the interest of our students. And I thank the panel for joining us today. Mr. Udall is voting in a committee. This is going to be a challenge today. We need a scientific breakthrough on having people in two places at once. And hopefully that's going to happen, because just as Mr. Udall is out now voting, I've got a markup in Judiciary Committee downstairs, so occasionally I'm going to be running from this room, literally, downstairs, 3 floors, to vote in that committee and then coming back. So, but we do have Mr. Rohrbacher here, and I would be happy to yield to the gentleman from California for an opening statement.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and let me just note that I too am going to be running off because I have a markup in my committee, and my International Relations Committee, where I'm a senior member, in which we are marking up a bill dealing with one of the greatest challenges we have to our country today, and that's our relationship with Iran. However, I'm leaving a hearing that I believe is focusing on what America's greatest challenge to our future is, our total future is, and that is making sure that we're equipped to compete in the world of tomorrow by making sure that our children are properly educated in math and science and engineering. I'd just like to leave a couple thoughts for the record. And we had a discussion on this subject somewhat about a month ago. And I mentioned that we need to pay young people and other employees who have an expertise in math and science and engineering. We need to pay them better, and that's a way perhaps to attract more young people into their professions. And I got a lot of flack for that, Mr. Chairman. I mean, to me, it's no brainer, but I just got a lot of flack for saying that it's the kids who see that the lawyers all have the good, nice-looking cars and the big houses, and maybe a very smart young person then decides to go into law rather than into engineering. I can understand that. Well, let me just note that I see cost and compensation as to be major factors in this discussion. And cost is, we need to bring down the cost for young people who want to get degrees in math, science, and engineering, so when they leave their school, they don't end up with a mountain of debt, which they are not then hired by some law firm to take care of that debt, because now they're on their own. Where math and engineering students from overseas who are here taking advantage of our graduate programs especially are sponsored by their own government, and they end up with no debt at all, where our students end up entirely in debt, and they're almost indentured servants for 5 or 10 years of their life. That needs to be addressed, and I have some legislation aimed at least providing full scholarships provided by every department of government that uses an engineer or a scientist or a mathematician to provide scholarships designed then the student could pay it back by working for that government agency, which is just a thought that I'd like to express to the panel. Second, we do not compensate our teachers in mathematics, science, and engineering at a different scale than we compensate the people who teach basket weaving and self-fulfillment, and perhaps things such as that. And I will tell you, no wonder somebody who is a scientist or someone who is an engineer is not going to be attracted to teaching if indeed his compensation, his or her compensation level, is no more than somebody who basically has skills that I was talking about. I'm not degrading basket weaving or home economics or anything like that, but perhaps we need the engineers, skilled people in our schools, and we need to compensate them for it. Finally, let me note this: when we talk about compensation, I've had many a panel here talking about this problem, and I've seen this over the last, been a member of the Science Committee now for 18 years. But you have these same businessmen who come here talking about the need of attracting our young people into these fields, and they are the same they're the same companies that come here lobbying us for massive numbers of H-1B visas so that we can bring in people from overseas with these skills. And let me tell you what happens when you bring hundreds of thousands, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of engineers and mathematicians actually into this country over and above what our regular quota is for immigration. What it does is bid down the wages. What it does, Mr. Chairman, is mean that the compensation that these young people, American young people, can expect is now lower because companies now can hire some fine young person from India or Pakistan or wherever to do that job at half the wage what they would have to pay an American to do it. All of these things are impacting on on us in trying to solve this problem. And I would suggest again that the way to make sure that we have more young people who are intelligent young people, because after all, at a certain level of intelligence, you can go into various fields, but we would like the young people to go into engineering and math and science, that the best way to do that, Mr. Chairman, is to make sure you pay them more money. And we shouldn't be ashamed of that. We live in a capitalist society, but we have to do it based on all of these factors of making sure they're not in debt when they get through school, and making sure we don't bid down their wages by bringing in hundreds of thousands of people from overseas in order to make sure they get less money in their income. With that, I appreciate you letting me have my say, and I will stay as long as I can, but I do have to handle this Iranian crisis, which is on us today, which I might add was created by engineers who are building nuclear power plants for a mullah-driven regime in Iran. So with that said, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rohrbacher. You'll be hearing from the Basket Weaver Association later. It's like the time I was on the floor and said something about used car salesmen and then got calls from around the country. Anyhow, Mr. Udall will be back momentarily, and when he comes back, we'll recognize him for an opening statement. In the meantime, let me go ahead and introduce our panel. Mr. Udall may, in the course of his remarks, want to introduce two folks from Colorado. But first, we have Dr. Elaine Seymour, the author of Talking About Leaving, Why Undergraduates Leave the Sciences. She's a former director of ethnography and evaluation research at the University of Colorado at Boulder. Dr. Carl Wyman is a distinguished professor of physics at the University of Colorado at Boulder, and the recipient of the 2001 Nobel Prize in Physics. Using his Nobel Award money, Dr. Wyman has launched an effort to reform introductory physics. He currently chairs the National Academy of Sciences Board on Science Education. Dr. John Burris is the president of Beloit College in Wisconsin. Prior to his appointment, Dr. Burris served for 8 years as director of marine biology. Director of Marine Biological Laboratory in Woods Hole, Massachusetts. He served for 9 years as professor of biology at Pennsylvania State University. Dr. Daniel Goroff is the vice president and dean of faculty at Harvey Mudd College. Prior to joining Harvey Mudd, Dr. Goroff was professor of the practice of mathematics and the assistant director of the Derek Bach Center for Teaching and Learning at Harvard University. He co-directs the Sloan Foundation Scientific and Engineering Workforce Project based at the National Bureau of Economic Research. Ms. Margaret Collins is the Assistant Dean of Science, Business, and Computer Technology at Moraine Valley Community College in the southwest suburbs of Chicago, Illinois. And when my colleague Dan Lipinski gets here, he's testifying at an Energy and Commerce Committee subcommittee meeting. When he gets here, we'll give a more full introduction of Ms. Collins by Mr. Lipinski. We generally recognize witnesses for 5 minutes, and then we'll look forward to a time of questions and further comments from you and answers as we move beyond the testimony. So, Dr. Seymour, if you'd like to begin.
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me, Chairman English. I appreciate this. It's a great honor. In my written testimony, I've structured my response in the following way. First of all, I've said something about factors which, in my view, are shaping the problem that we have, and then their consequences for current and future STEM undergraduates, then something about strategies which I think will make a difference. Some of these are underway, some of these are needed, and then some caveats. What I think is underlying the problem that we face is a historic decline in the perceived value of teaching. It has general relevance in the population, but it's particularly salient as part of the professional role of STEM faculty, where it has suffered over the last half century with respect to the dominance of research. We noted it in particular in our book talking about leaving, in the decline in the number of seniors who were interested in entering K through 12 science and math teaching dropped from 20% to about less than 7% by senior year over the course of our study. And most interestingly, the seniors described their faculty as discouraging students from entering K-12 math and science teaching. And the students who decided to go on did not disclose their intention normally to faculty because they feared that faculty would take them less seriously. Now, this problem creates, I think, an imbalance in our science structures. First of all, we have a salary structure in STEM faculty which is disproportionate to teaching effort. We have a reward structure for tenure and promotion such that research achievements outweigh and are more stringently defined than teaching or service work. And teaching and scholarship in teaching is barely developed or acknowledged. The consequences are certainly seen in our work that the most serious problem spoken about both by people who field switched out of the sciences and those who persisted amongst well-qualified students whom we interviewed on 7 different campuses was that poor learning experiences were their commonest problem. So for both groups, this was the main issue. There were 23 issues that they raised. This was the commonest issue. This has not gone unnoted amongst the many, many reports that we have seen over the last few years that the quality of undergraduate STEM education has declined and is declining. The second consequence, I think, shows in the inadequate preparation of our teaching assistants who become young faculty, which then contributes significantly to poor quality undergraduate learning experiences, both now and when they become faculty. And we have a terrible shortage of good programs for training TAs. They tend to be short, orientations not specific to the discipline or the course. They do not significantly ground TAs in learning research and the knowledge and the practices that derive from this. And unfortunately, the STEM TAs seem the least likely to receive appropriate preparation. I have reviewed all this evidence in our latest book, Partners in Innovation, which is about TAs. Thirdly, we have serious limitations in the K-12 math and science teaching force. It takes the form both of a serious and growing shortfall of disciplined, qualified math and science teachers in our middle and high schools, and it also takes the form of problems in the quality of those teachers. And I've offered you in the testimony some of this evidence. We have vacancies that we simply cannot fill, and in the latest report of the National Academy of Sciences, The Gathering Storm, 59% of middle school students had math teachers who lacked a math major. We saw this in our own work, that just about the same number of switchers and persisters in the STEM majors struggled with under-preparation from the deficiencies of their math and science education in schools. The TAs that I mentioned earlier also endorsed this situation. Over 2/3 of the TAs in our 2005 study, and in another study done at the University of Nebraska, the same proportion reported that students arrived underprepared in the fundamental knowledge and skills needed to perform adequately. The strategies that I've outlined in my testimony focus largely on professional development, based on methods grounded in research about how students learn. And the groups who are, in my view, in need of professional development are current and future K-12 science and math teachers, they are TAs in STEM undergraduate courses, and they are current STEM faculty. And matching the faculty incentives and reward system to the objectives of an improved education in science for all is critical if we're going to succeed in any of those strategies. I conclude my remarks at that point.
Thank you, Dr. Seymour. Dr. Wyman, I should underscore just how impressed we on the committee are with your use of your Nobel Award in the furtherance of changing education method, and that really is very impressive. So maybe you want to talk about that a little bit in the course of your testimony. I hope you will. Dr. Wyman.
Okay. Thank you. My main points are simple. One, undergraduate science education is based on an obsolete model and is doing a poor job at providing the education that's needed today. And two, we now know how to fix it. And three, until you fix it, you can't fix K-12 science education. So the basis of these claims are that there's a relatively recent phenomenon that a number of people like myself are doing education research within the science disciplines like physics, particularly at the college level. And this scientific approach to science education provides a growing body of evidence showing that the great majority of college students, both science majors and non-science majors, are not gaining worthwhile understanding from their science classes. Most students are learning that science is boring and little more than useless memorization of facts that are forgotten after the exam. Our methods are different from those of Elaine Seymour, but our research indicates a similar conclusion, namely, science majors are not being created in college. Rather, they are primarily the few students that, because of some unusual predisposition rather than ability, manage to survive their undergraduate science instruction. However, this same science education research that shows the dismal results produced by the traditional science instruction is also showing us how to improve the situation. Experimental teaching methods have been developed that achieve much better learning and attitudes about science for most students. Widely adopted, these methods would increase the pipeline of scientists, produce a more technically literate and skilled general public, and provide better trained K-12 teachers. I emphasize this latter point because our studies show that the future K-12 teachers are among the worst in their learning of science and math in college. That's why I claim that unless you improve science education at the college level, you're wasting time and money on trying to make major improvements in K-12. So why haven't universities changed undergraduate science education so that their students do learn math and science much better? They haven't done it because, first, while there's never been a shortage of opinions, only recently has there been real data showing how badly they were doing and how it could be improved. Second, the computer technology required for economically practical, widespread implementation of these new approaches also didn't exist until recently. And finally, and most important, there's no real incentives to make changes other than altruism. I spend a lot of time visiting and evaluating universities, and I can assure you that their financial support, prestige, and the tuition they can charge is quite unrelated to what their students are actually learning in science. To make these changes I talked about will require a significant investment of money and effort. And while these costs are small compared to the total spent on either K-12 or higher education, resources are tight, particularly at public universities. So how best to bring about this desired change? I would argue that the first priority needs to be incentives, which can either be positive or negative, to change education at the department level of the large research universities. For better or worse, these research universities set the standards for undergraduate science education in the U.S. and train nearly all the college science teachers. The department is the unit for science education, and to have sustained change, departments as a whole must change how they approach science education. Virtually none of the federal support for improving college science education addresses the issue at this crucial level. The limited support available is typically spent on short-term projects that involve 1 or 2 people per department spread across as many institutions and departments as possible. These programs have had some excellent results, but they're doomed to largely remain localized and short-term because they ignore organizational realities. It's like trying to change the direction a stream flows by scooping out a few buckets of water and pouring it in a different direction. So, in summary, enough is known about how college students learn science and how to measure and achieve that learning so that undergraduate science education can be dramatically improved for all students. However, it's not going to happen until colleges, particularly the large research universities, have incentives to make the investment required to bring about this change. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony, and I appreciate all the testimony I've heard. I, of course, have previous affiliation with University of Colorado and Angela, and so it's like old home week here. Dr. Burris, and I've had a friend who taught at Beloit for a while. Pleased to have you with us.
My name is John Burris, and I am the president of Beloit College. I speak today from the perspective of a president of a liberal arts college with a long and distinguished record in science and math education. My comments are also guided by my career as a research biologist and educator, most recently as the director of the Marine Biological Laboratory in Woods Hole, Massachusetts, an institution dedicated to research and graduate education. Although there are a number of challenges in science and engineering education, I will focus my comments today on STEM education at the college undergraduate level. First, let me summarize my main recommendation for your consideration. As NSF's budget is doubled in the next 10 years, I recommend that doubled dollars be targeted for building and sustaining a robust learning environment for undergraduates in colleges and universities across the United States. It is important to note that we already have a good idea of how to improve undergraduate STEM education, as many years of direct observation and research have shown that students learn science best in small classes with extensive hands-on experience using an inquiry-based approach. Lectures and laboratories are often merged, and there is ample opportunity for learning in groups and group discussions, not just learning by individuals working alone. At Beloit College, the success of these approaches is apparent, for in contrast to national averages, we retain to graduation more than 80% of the students who express an interest in a STEM major. We also introduce non-science majors to STEM in a meaningful way, helping to ensure an educated public that will provide the support and encouragement needed if the U.S. is going to remain the world leader in science and technology. In fact, the primary reason I came to Beloit College was my interactions at the MBL with students from small liberal arts colleges such as Beloit. I was incredibly impressed with the preparation of these young men and women in our semester in environmental sciences program. They had clearly been taught to think independently and critically and were able to conduct graduate-level research while in Woods Hole. The successes of the liberal arts colleges have not translated to all other colleges and universities. There are a number of reasons. Our small class sizes, use of research equipment, and heavy dependence on tenured faculty to do teaching are expensive. We are committed to that expense, a cost that is partially defrayed by our annual tuition, but also underwritten by alumni donations and grants. Federal government, state legislatures, and other financial supporters have to acknowledge and face squarely the fact that hands-on science is expensive. As I stated in my recommendation, we need the NSF budget doubled to help cover some of these costs. We cannot rely on science being effectively taught in lecture rooms with 400 students and in laboratories that use antiquated equipment and rely on teaching assistants and cookbook lab manuals. To excite and interest students in science, we need to have them do science as it is actually done. Many of our nation's colleges and universities have opted for a cost-effective method of instruction with little concern for the educational effectiveness of that approach. We need to eliminate overly large introductory courses, often with instructors who see their role being to discourage rather than to encourage majors. But none of us can rest on our laurels any more than a research scientist stops studying and investigating after a successful experiment. Instead, we need to continue to refine the way we teach. We need to do research on pedagogy. We need to experiment, and we need to disseminate what works, and just as importantly, what doesn't. We need to concern ourselves with what we teach. Textbooks have gotten enormous. We can't jam all the material down our students' throats. My friend Bruce Albert's textbook is endearingly nicknamed Fat Alberts by the students. We have to sift and winnow, and we need to constantly be reviewing and refining the curriculum. We need to keep learning how people learn and let that inform our teaching. The world is not waiting for us. We have to keep changing, improving, and educating. What can the federal government do to help strengthen the pipeline at the undergraduate level? The NSF needs to support the development of new pedagogies and new curricula, and then support the implementation and dissemination of the methodologies that are successful. Funds must be provided for the equipment and supplies that are needed to implement the most effective teaching. At Beloit, we have discovered that students' use of research-grade equipment, even at the introductory course level, has been enormously successful in teaching all students how science is done. We need to have support to build the new science and engineering buildings that will enable us to apply the latest methodologies and house the needed classroom laboratories for exciting and interesting science education. Finally, we need to support our faculty to do research and remain scientifically current. Science and engineering education is expensive. It does cost more than other fields, and that fact needs to be acknowledged, and the funds need to be provided. The future is challenging, but there is no reason that we can't be successful in providing an exciting STEM curriculum that includes all of our students. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Burris. Dr. Guroff.
Chairman English, distinguished representatives of the subcommittee, I very much appreciate the opportunity to participate in these hearings on what's working in undergraduate science, mathematics, and engineering education. And to illustrate what's working, I think of a senior named Stephanie at Harvey Mudd College, who's been invited to professional physics conferences as the only undergraduate there to speak about her research findings. Actually, this happens rather routinely to our students. Once, though, a well-known researcher came over to her faculty advisor to praise Stephanie and her talk, and to ask if the advisor had thought about how very unlikely it was that Stephanie's discovery could lead to a product with commercial potential. The advisor cut him off and said, "You don't get it. She pointed across the room at Stephanie and said, "That is my product. I produce physicists." 3 quick points about this story. First of all, the U.S. needs more undergraduate products like Stephanie. But how many do we need, everyone asks. All the recent reports about competitiveness raise alarms based on the number of scientists and engineers being trained abroad. As a mathematician, I'm a bit skeptical about numbers. Perhaps China really is producing hundreds of thousands more engineers annually than we do. Well, the Chinese army is also very big. But regarding either our military forces or our scientific workforce, I am less interested in body counts and more interested in the capacity that young people like Stephanie demonstrate for teamwork, communication, innovation, and creativity, not to mention facility with the latest technology. We may never be able to recruit as many technical students as the Chinese are now, but we do have lots and lots of potential Stephanies, and U.S. institutions can, precisely because we do not have to operate at such huge scales, do a better job of selecting and enculturating productive members of our scientific communities. As with the Army, more scholarships and other incentives may help with initial recruiting, but what ultimately keeps people working effectively is a sense of belonging to a community that is purposeful, well-equipped, and important to society. I have met so many undergraduates at Harvey-Mudd and at Harvard and throughout the country who passionately want to become scientists, engineers, mathematicians, or teachers so that they can devote their talents to solving some of the world's problems. My hope is that the admirable intentions of the President's American Competitiveness Initiative will be implemented in ways that not only provide these passionate students with temporary scholarships, but that also demonstrate to them that careers in these professions can be as sustained and sustaining over a lifetime as the other kinds of opportunities available to U.S. students. Which brings me to point number 2. We need more faculty like Stephanie's advisor. Again, I find little shortage of interest or talent, but much to be learned from community-building organizations like Jeannie Naram's Project Kaleidoscope and Harvard's Derek Bach Center for Teaching and Learning. Point number 3, we need more programs that can prepare students like Stephanie for exciting work as an engineer, mathematician, teacher, or scientist. What good is it to attract young people to study a field unless we have the institutions and the infrastructure for providing appropriate programs, courses, and experiences? Changes in science and technology are so rapid and so expensive today that it is hard to expect each individual college on its own to keep its facilities, its curricula, and its facilities all up to date without benefiting either from an occasional grant or from the results of grants made to other organizations. The Division of Undergraduate Education at NSF has traditionally supported everything from teacher preparation to course, curriculum, and laboratory improvement. The budget for such work has been slashed in recent years, though. Regardless of what you think should happen to K-12 educational efforts at NSF, support for undergraduate education should not only remain based at the National Science Foundation, it should thrive there. This is essential to achieving the goals of the American Competitiveness Initiative, since the college years are so very critical for both the future teachers we need to improve K-12 science and mathematics education, as well as the technical specialists we need to improve innovation and economic competitiveness. Trying to promote innovation and competitiveness without paying careful attention to the role of undergraduate education would be as absurd as trying to promote progress in science and engineering without paying careful attention to the role of mathematics. Finally, let me assure you that Stephanie, with 4 published papers so far, is not a magical exception, but rather an inspirational example of what can work widely. Over 20 original mathematical papers have been published in refereed journals by Harvey-Mudd College undergraduates during the past 4 years, and Mudder's names were on 13 patent disclosures last year alone. Through our clinic program, students work on real design, testing, or research projects, cases if you will, proposed and sponsored by industries or by the federal government. These clinic experiences are carefully structured to develop those student skills related to communication, teamwork, leadership, and creativity. For example, Fluidmaster will soon begin manufacturing a toilet designed by Harvey Mudd undergraduates that saves 10% of the water needed per flush. The National Institute of Standards and Technology has supported the development at HMC of a system that first responders can use to warn them when a burning building is about to collapse. And both Hewlett-Packard as well as Amgen are commissioning international clinics this year that will also help students learn to work, think, and cooperate globally. These are just a few examples and principles illustrating what works when you actually set out to produce engineers, educators, and mathematicians, not to mention scientists like Stephanie. Be happy to provide more details during the question period.
Thank you very much, and I apologize for the musical chairs here, but Chairman Inglis has another committee he has to go to periodically to vote. I also thank you for reminding us of the important role, both of you, that the smaller liberal arts colleges play, and I think they provide the best teacher candidates that I've seen in many cases. I also have a connection to Harvey Mudd because one of your predecessors, a dean, tried to recruit me some years ago to come and teach at Harvey Mudd. And
We're going to try again.
I'm too old. I'm too old. But next, we're pleased to recognize Ms. Collins from Moraine Valley Community College, which I have no connection with. But welcome. We look forward to your testimony.
That's okay. By the time I'm done, you'll all feel very comfortable with Moraine Valley Community College. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you for this opportunity to testify on behalf of Moraine Valley Community College. My name is Margaret Collins, and I'm the Assistant Dean of Science, Business, and Computer Technologies. Moraine Valley is located in the southwest suburban Cook County in Illinois. I mention this because community colleges are all about the communities they serve. I have considered this community my home for my entire life, and I consider myself a Southsider, just like the world champion Chicago White Sox. I was raised in a little suburb called Marionette Park, and now live and raise my children, Carly and Billy, in Evergreen Park. My sister lives 2 blocks away, and my parents are right down the street. Moraine Valley is the second largest community college in Illinois, out of 48, with a spring 2006 head count at just under 16,000. We offer 123 degree and certificate programs and have just over 46,000 students enrolled annually. We also encounter obstacles to recruitment and retention of STEM majors. As we converse today about the recruitment and retention of STEM undergraduates, I bring the unique perspective of the community college. Certainly, our struggles are similar to institutions that grant upper-level degrees, and I echo the sentiments of the panel here today, but distinctive to the community college and unique to Moraine Valley Community College are issues that arise because of demographics, geographic boundaries, and open admission policies. Community colleges serve all people, and we are proud to do so, but we also must face obstacles including underpreparedness in math and science. With the high school population, we also encounter misalignment between secondary and post-secondary math and science, which causes a knowledge gap for many of the students entering Moraine Valley Community College. By all means, as an educator who works closely with the area high schools, who has children in a local elementary school, I sympathize with their struggles to meet and exceed state standards while providing a quality, well-rounded education. I praise all of these teachers and educators for their efforts in this challenging time. Despite these obstacles, our discussion today must focus on solutions. Our most recent accomplishment has resulted from a finely tuned collaboration and lots of human energy. I am lucky to work with so many dedicated individuals that the Academy Awards would have the orchestra playing only a third of the way through my thank yous. CASIA, the Center for System Security and Information Assurances, with much appreciated funding from the National Science Foundation, also an ATE center, enables us to address issues of recruitment and retention from several perspectives. Briefly now, but in greater detail in the written testimony, the ATA Center has helped us to develop curriculum, expand internship opportunities, build a Women in Technology mentoring program, produce video that show technology in a more appealing and interesting way, offer career development course that dispels common myths. We've also been able to provide low or no-cost teacher training and curriculum development. We've also developed an excellent outreach program, which I wanted to tell you a little bit more about today. During the past 2 years, I've had the opportunity to work with a very special group of students as part of our CASIA outreach program. The high school students that attend the Myrta Ramirez Computer Science Academy in Chicago, Illinois, do so because they seek careers as programmers, IT professionals, IT security specialists, and network engineers. Our efforts to assist these young people focus on providing a seamless transition from high school to college. We have sponsored several on-campus events combined with activities at their own school that allow students to earn college credit, gain skills, and understand the importance of continuation beyond high school. Through our community outreach event, a computer health clinic, students assisted community members by conducting virus scans and other security-related operations on PCs. The students also competed in teams and presented their projects before a judging committee. The winning teams were invited to Washington, D.C. to present at the annual ATE conference. My best experience as an educator was participating in the travel with these dozen or more students. The experience for all of us was pretty amazing, and the result of hard work, dedication, and good funding was visible to all. In addition to NSF funding, we have appreciated funding from other federal sources. It's outlined in greater detail in the written testimony, but Carl Perkins and Tech Prep funding has significantly aided our efforts to recruit and retain STEM majors. It has done this through dual credit, math alignment programs, tutoring, implementation of contextual learning, career exploration opportunities for high school and elementary students, and of course to purchase equipment and supplies. The college also engages TRIO funds to provide support services, academic advising, to create awareness, and again, to provide some tutoring and academic support. The college uses operational funds to help recruit and retain STEM majors. We do this by providing dual enrollment opportunities for advanced placement high school students in calculus, statistics, college algebra, trigonometry, biology, and chemistry. We work closely with the upper-level colleges to create 2+2 agreements that assist Moraine Valley students transition into engineering and computer science programs. We improve diversity in our full-time teaching faculty through a strong commitment to diversity in our hiring practices. As for the measurement of effectiveness, my written testimony outlines in more detail the scrutiny and thoroughness applied to all of our assessment activities. At Moraine Valley, institutional effectiveness has always been and will remain a high priority for our institution, and I'd be glad to entertain your questions upon conclusion of this statement. In closing, I'd like to emphasize ways in which the federal government may continue to help us address the obstacles we face. We need to continue to emphasize the seriousness of the social and economic issues related to recruitment and retention of STEM majors. We need to provide more recognition to the role of the community college in providing pathways and opportunities in higher education, especially for the underserved and underrepresented. We need more support for post-secondary collaboration through Tech Prep and Carl Perkins. We also need to emphasize the social issues, including gender, race, and socioeconomic status. We also need to replicate successful best practices and programs. Thank you again for allowing the voice of the community college to be present at this hearing today. Community colleges have become and will remain a vital means for students otherwise unable to participate in higher education. The issue of recruitment and retention of science, technology, engineering, and math majors is a crucial economic and social issue that demands greater consideration. I feel honored to have been afforded this opportunity to sit with an esteemed panel and to contribute to the discussion. I look forward to the positive outcomes that result from this conversation.
Thank you, Ms. Collins. Thank you all for your testimony. I'll recognize myself for a round of questions. Dr. Wyman, you said that a very interesting part of your testimony that unless we improve science education at the college level first, we're wasting our time and money on making major improvements in K through 12. And I wonder if you could help us some, because we're getting ready to spend a fair amount of money on K-12 education. We do year after year. The president has requested somewhere in the nature of $380 million, I believe it is, for some of his initiatives that are aimed at K through 12. And I wonder if you might tell us if you were in Congress evaluating those proposals, where would you focus the money? And also, what challenges have you found from the administration, in the administration of your university, in implementing the kind of changes that you think would make a difference?
Okay, so those are quite different questions.
Right.
So let me just talk about the K-12 situation. And I don't presume to be an expert on K-12 education, and it's a vast program. What I will claim to be somewhat of an expert on is looking at the science preparation, the undergraduate math and science preparation of K-12 teachers, and not just both their content knowledge, but we also look at sort of their general beliefs about what science is, how you learn science, and it's dismal is the bottom line. And so it's just clear that these future teachers have to have a better understanding of science, and they have to have a better understanding of what science is, as well as sort of being competent at it if they're going to present it in a reasonable way to students. Now, so that, in terms of how that breaks down into focusing on what you would do, again, I mean, I'd have to give it more detailed thought, but I think that it's clear that too often people can become certified teachers and then end up teaching math and science without ever teacher certification does not imply, and often is quite independent of any competence in those subjects, and certainly a level of competence required to teach them effectively. So
let me just ask on
yeah.
that point to see if anyone else on the panel would like to comment on that. Dr. Seymour.
Okay. I think we are, Mr. Chairman, in an emergency situation that is gradually getting worse. We have both a shortfall in the supply of teachers who have at least one major in math or science, or even a minor in math or science, to replace the teaching force that we have. We have depended for many years on very able women mathematicians who used to fill our classrooms as math teachers, but are now retired or retiring, and young women with math qualifications are not going into schools. So we've taken a resource for granted. We're now in a situation where we cannot fill the vacancies that we have with qualified math and science teachers in many states. I've cited Texas, New Jersey, Florida as 3 states of which I'm aware where their vacancies are largely filled by alternative and emergency certification, by bringing in people who have some background in STEM majors to fill those places. And the provision of math and science across the country, the teachers, is extremely patchy. It's very variable. In our research, we have found that even in the same state, there is enormous variation in what you can expect. If you happen to be a student in those classes, it's very bad in schools which are predominantly schools with minority young people in them, and we saw that very clearly in our research. For instance, young people who came from predominantly black and Hispanic higher middle schools into university presented some of the most dismal stories that we heard in our talking about leaving research. They came in, as we called it, overconfident and underprepared. So they were strongly supported by their communities and their teachers in coming to university to take STEM majors, but when they got there were very shocked to find that they were not remotely prepared for what they had to undertake. And this was a devastating experience from which they tended not to recover. So huge variation as well as a shortfall in the quality in what is offered. It's regionally very, very different. And we have a crisis such that we both, I think, are obliged to support and improve the teaching force that we have by any means at our disposal, by outreach work, by summer workshops and so on. These go on, and they are well supported by the National Science Foundation and others. These have to go on, but at the same time we must recruit teachers for our system that have disciplinary degrees in the STEM majors, and that's where we are woefully short. That's what is not happening. And I agree with my distinguished colleague that unless we attend to the supply of teachers from the universities, from baccalaureate students, we are deepening a serious national crisis in the quality of our K-12 teaching force. And the comparisons with the international situation, I think, are very, very well known.
It's very helpful. Now, the second part of my question, I'm interested in getting Dr. Wyman and Dr. Burris to talk about this, the second part of that, which is, here we have a professor and the president of a college sitting side by side. The challenges that you've faced in terms of getting an administration to move the college culture, the university culture.
I think it's important to appreciate, I mean, I work at a large research university. At large research universities, the culture is really not set by the administration. You can't go and tell a physics department or a chemistry department or a biology department, as a president, you just can't go and tell them what they should teach, how they should teach, what fields they should go into. They just ignore you. That's the way those structures work. So that's what I'm saying is it really happens at the department level, and to a large extent, those departments they succeed or fail on their external success. I mean, that's why they're kind of decoupled from the administration. Successful departments go out and they find federal agencies that'll support them to bring in more research dollars. They can be more active. They can get more prestige. And so that's what I'm saying. That's where the reward system, and you know, the federal government's somewhat responsible for that. But that's really created the rewards system and really the structure and who answers or doesn't answer to whom in the large research universities.
Very helpful. Dr. Burris, your comments on that.
Well, I don't want to sound overly Pollyannish, but the situation at small liberal arts colleges is really quite different. My sense is that both the faculty and the administration, in making decisions about what model we think works, in fact means that there's little or no resistance to implementation of small classes, hands-on learning, inquiry-based methodology. I certainly know that's the case at Calvin College, where the physics is taught that way, I'm sure. But the point being, it's exactly as Dr. Wyman said, we're comparing a little bit apples and oranges. The reward system, which I think very successfully produces K through 12 teachers as well as future scientists at small liberal arts colleges, is based very much on the success of the faculty as teachers. They must be scholars, and we strongly believe the emphasis and importance of their scholarship, but they first and foremost must be teachers. As teachers, they see their primary responsibility being to teach in the best possible way. And that's one of the arguments for value of small liberal arts colleges, not only to train future scientists, but train future teachers. We have an education department. Anyone who wishes to be a teacher in biology or physics or math must major in the disciplinary field. The education department provides some of the pedagogical assistance, but their majors upon graduation will be in the various fields that they will ultimately teach. So I don't think, I think it's a very different reward system. If I can comment on my own career, where I started at Penn State, the reward system would be very similar to the University of Colorado. That is, I was judged on my ability to receive external funding. I was judged on my publication record. And to be quite frank with you, my teaching was very low on the totem pole in terms of a reward system. That's not the case at liberal arts colleges. And until research universities are willing to attach a reward, and that reward translates into promotion and tenure, salary increases to teaching, we are not going to change the system easily. And I'm sure that Dr. Wyman could speak further to that. But we have a very different system as an administrator at a small liberal arts college.
Can I make a somewhat of a rejoinder here? I actually spend a reasonable amount of time visiting, not Beloit, but many small colleges, and I speak lots of places. And there's a difference between being dedicated to teaching and valuing it and doing it effectively. And I see many small colleges where and faculty at universities as well, are very committed to teaching, but they're following an obsolete model that our research says just doesn't work very well. And that happens at small colleges and big colleges, universities, and so on. It's really a different method. It's really an evidence research-based method that by and large is not implemented at any institutions on a widespread basis.
I'm extending my time quite a bit, and I should call on Dr. Ehlers, I believe, next. So, Dr. Ehlers.
Well, thank you. It's very difficult for me to ask a question. I basically feel like saying amen, because it's rare that I agree with things that are said by almost the entire panel of witnesses that are before us. But you're all right on target. You're looking at different parts of the target in some cases, but I really appreciate the work that, not just the work you're doing, but the work you represent. And I'm absolutely delighted to see what I would call the awakening of the consciousness of universities and colleges about the importance of teaching and the search to do it properly and do it correctly. As some of you know, because I've had conversations with you, I spent a good deal of my academic career trying to teach elementary school teachers both science and how to teach science. And that arose out of something very simple. I became concerned about what was called scientific illiteracy in the late 60s, and simply asked myself, what can I, as a physicist, do? How can I impact that? And decided that I was not likely to ever have a national impact, since I never intended to get into politics. But I decided what I could do is in my classroom teaching, I could volunteer to teach future elementary school teachers, and that guaranteed me the job of doing it because no one else really wanted to do it. And tried to develop programs that would assist them and make them feel comfortable once they got into the classroom. I also taught a couple of National Science Foundation summer institutes for teachers who were ready in the classroom, which is by far the greatest problem in this country at the moment. How do you reach the teachers who are already there, who did not learn enough science and don't know how to teach it properly? And it's through no fault of their own. I never knock the teachers, because every classroom I've worked in, teachers desperately wanted to teach science and mathematics properly, and they were afraid of the subject. They did not feel qualified to teach it. And so I think our number one immediate objective has to be to make them at least have enough knowledge so that they feel confidence about what they're trying to teach and not avoid it. But teaching future teachers is equally important, and we have to do both. My question for you is what role do you see the federal government having? We have no control over curriculum at the federal level, no control over textbooks, anything of that sort. Most of our efforts are going to try to help poor school districts and poor students. and by that I mean financially poor in both cases. But what would you advise us to do in terms of developing programs that can help people like you and the people at your institutions do an effective job of reaching both existing teachers and the future teachers?
I'd like to agree with my colleagues that I think the first priority should be investments in in-service and pre-service work with teachers, including content faculty at the college level, working with those teachers. And I just wanted to say, though, that my experience with this is a little bit different from my colleagues, and to give some hope to the notion that federal and other dollars can make a difference in all of this. So at Harvard, a place where I would say some people have heard that the faculty and administration can be a bit obstinate. I was the founding director of a program, a master's degree program in mathematics for teaching. It's run by the mathematics department. It's offered through the Harvard Extension School. And right now we are enrolling about 100 teachers per semester in these courses. And I also want to say that throughout the mathematical community, there have been a great deal of reports and reforms specifically about teacher preparation and its importance for the country and for the discipline. So I want to say that it can be done and it can make a difference.
I personally think one of the roadblocks has been is strictly a cultural one that I don't see in very many other countries, and that's this cultural belief that somehow math and science are not for women, and perhaps even minorities. And that is, the tragedy is not that that view is being imposed, but that these groups tend to feel that within themselves. And since the majority of our teachers are female, that creates a real problem. And I've spent years trying to overcome that cultural bias. I don't know how we could address that. But I gather from the response and the smiles I see that someone else asked this question before me. I'm sorry I had to step out to go to something else. But where would you envision the programs best being housed? National Science Foundation, Department of Education, or should we simply hand the money to the states and ask them to do it, following certain guidelines? I see.
Lots of hands on that one, and my answer is very quick and simple. The National Science Foundation, I think, is absolutely the best place for such programs to be housed. Unequivocally, no arguments.
Is everyone agreed on that? It's very important for you to send that message to the Congress and to the administration as well, because there seems to be a shift in opinion on that.
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
Working as I do as an evaluator of programs, many of which are funded by the National Science Foundation, I would say that I've seen sterling work done in the collaboratives for teacher preparation, which are regional. In the math and science partnerships, I'm a member of the board of the one at Puerto Rico, quite magnificent. That work needs to continue. I have seen directly the evidence and personally the work done by the workshops, many different kinds of workshops, some by private foundations like Project Kaleidoscope, but also ones which have been funded by the National Science Foundation, the mid-workshops in chemistry and others. Workshops are one of the very best ways to get the knowledge out there to faculty who are interested or curious or even skeptical about new ways of teaching, and can come into a safe place and try it hands-on and learn it with other people without loss of face and in a sense, in a setting of camaraderie, and go away and work on it in their own classrooms and still have that support from the workshop. It's a wonderful way of building the whole community nationally of people who are interested in and engaged in the business of how students learn. So NSF workshops, very, very important. And then something which we have not done well, which I would advocate, we need programs to educate the teaching assistants in how to teach in accordance with the new knowledge that we have. There is plenty of knowledge out there. It's very, very available, and it's also very accessible. So we're not short of knowledge about how to teach well, but we are a little bit primitive in our understanding of how to educate our teaching assistants, how to use it in an active and interactive support of the classes. Unfortunately, most students do not learn their science and math in liberal arts colleges. It would be nice if they did, but the majority are learning their math and science in the major universities. And that's where the support of the TA for the professor who is constrained increasingly to work just in a lecture mode, the support of the TA who is the person who has the active engagement with the student, that's where the effort needs to be placed, I think. And nationally, we're not doing that well. And I would love to see the National Science Foundation and others supporting that effort.
A very pragmatic question. You say you've been in a lot of workshops. What do you think is the optimum length of time in a workshop?
I think good. I've reviewed in my testimony what we know from evaluation of the workshops. What I see, I said, is a building of a national network which connects people who are not of the same department or even necessarily of the same institutions, and builds them into a virtual community, which is actually the mainspring for what is now happening in improving science education. People are connected. People meet each other at the professional meetings. The professional societies have responded by developing education sections. So I see over the last 15 years the building up of a skilled workforce amongst science and math faculty who are the people who teach others and who constantly replenish the workshop teachers. So I am very, very impressed with them, and we should support them financially. Incidentally, they're extremely cheap because the faculty who man the workshops and woman the workshops do it for free. We just pay their expenses.
Thank you. And if I may have a little more time, Mr. Chairman.
Certainly.
Dr. Wyman, you've talked about the research you've done and that the results are clear and methodologies are clear. Has this been adopted by your university and by your departments, or are you a prophet without honor in your own country?
Somewhere in the middle. It's being somewhat adopted. But it's sort of on an individual by individual basis. Again, it's, and I think my department isn't any different from many other departments. It's a question of everybody's busy, trying to be as successful as possible. It takes extra time to change, to develop new teaching materials, new teaching methods, to assess, do good assessment if they're working. And so, the convincing people to do that right now, it's pure altruism. You talk to them enough and you show them the results, and they'll try and fit it in a little bit here and a little bit there. But change driven by altruism is pretty slow, whereas when I see you get big changes, or when there's a major, I see changes in physics departments that clearly follow federal funding, where there's, but it's always in the research side where there's a major program. It's clear it's going to be a large amount of money over a sustained time that really could transform a department. Suddenly a department decides that, plasma science or nanotechnology is suddenly the wonderful, important, high priority thing for their department. And because it can support, they see it correctly as supporting programs, faculty for many years, and they'll move into that area. If there was something, but, for teaching, you put in the extra time because you get a warm, fuzzy feeling inside, but that's about all it comes down to. So You know, that's within my department and lots of other places.
Yeah, no, it sounds very familiar. Now, do you think that an NSF program, which was aimed at a specific department at a specific university, in other words, they'd apply for a grant to perhaps even provide some released faculty time for this, but certainly something that would develop the camaraderie, the spirit, the altruism that is necessary. Do you think that could be successful?
If it was designed right, I would be optimistic it could be. I mean, like I say, the best model is how research funds have transformed departments and institutions even. But I'd say right now that's the only examples we have of really where you have major cultural changes in higher education is following the money. That's what it comes down to.
You need altruistic people who will follow the money. Thank you very much. Well, you had a comment?
Can I offer a different perspective, actually?
At Harvard, they have so much money. They don't need to.
Well, I think that altruism is actually an important motivator. But I also want to mention that these problems are intellectually interesting, and that's the reason why most academics went into the field that they did, because they like to solve problems and they want to know about the research and the kind of work that Dr. Wyman was talking about before. And if you present it that way, people can be very engaged in it. And again, at the Derek Bach Center for Teaching and Learning at Harvard, where I was the associate director, we were able to bring people in to do a great deal of work, get themselves videotapes, to participate in research, to get all sorts of feedback on their teaching. And this was done confidential and voluntary. There was no rewards for it or anything else, but the important part about it, and extensive work, by the way, with the graduate students. None of the people teaching calculus in the mathematics department were allowed near students before they had gone through a detailed apprenticeship with visiting classes and doing practice lectures and being videotaped and getting all sorts of feedback from coaches who they were paired with. And only then were they allowed to stand up in front of calculus teachers, so, in front of calculus students, I should say. But the important part about it was that we made all these things intellectually interesting and useful. And people showed up, and they continue to show up, and I think it really can make a difference in that way.
Interesting. When I was a student at Berkeley, my thesis advisor advanced the theorem that the people who are really concerned about teaching well are the ones who don't really have to worry about it because they're generally already good teachers. And in fact, when I was teaching there, I always used student evaluation sheets several times during the semester. And he scoffed at that and says, people who hand those out are the ones who don't need it. The people who really need it are afraid to hand them out and don't.
These were programs really for all the different graduate
people
students and for faculty, including people who, I have to say, started off really unemployable. Great talents in mathematics from other countries who could not teach at all, and who after work and after getting the idea that the culture of the department was that this was important, this was interesting, and something that you could get feedback on and improve with, that some of these graduate students who, as I say, were totally unemployable to begin with, ended up earning teaching awards.
Excellent.
So it can be done, and we just need more examples, a little bit more resources.
Well, you've established that you think the National Science Foundation should be running the programs. What we haven't established clearly is the types of programs. I don't think there's time for that here, but I would certainly appreciate any ideas you would want to send the committee about the best types of programs to sponsor.
And you've already said there isn't time, but I'll jump in anyway. That's when I said the doubling of the NSF budget, which is going to happen. We want to make sure that that doubling includes funding of research on pedagogy, on curriculum, makes it an intellectually interesting problem, makes it something that faculty are rewarded for doing, can compete for grants. And then the second part is sustainability, that it's not simply one program works for 2 to 3 years, there has to be some sustainability. So within the NSF budget, just making certain that this is not lost in the shuffle as the doubling occurs and the money moves primarily to the research directorates, make certain that there is money specifically for these questions like curriculum and learning how people learn and pedagogy.
Thank you.
I would echo that.
Yeah, thank you. Now, let me recognize Dr. Lipinski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize for being here, getting here late. This is something that is very near and dear to my heart, and I think is critically important. I had I've been working on this bill I introduced on hospital price disclosure. I've been working for a year to get a hearing on this, and I was testifying over there. It's actually a bill I introduced with the chairman. So I was taking care of that. But I want to thank all of the witnesses here, and especially extend a special thanks to Ms. Collins for being here from Moraine Valley Community College, which is located in Palos Hills, Illinois, in my district. And I'd like to thank her for what she is able to add to this hearing, because we sort of overlook the community colleges, and they are critically important. And if we don't get the kids interested there, the ones who are attending, then they're not going to go on. They're not going to continue in any of the STEM fields. So I thank Ms. Collins for her work and for her testimony here today. And STEM education, like I said, is near and dear to my heart. I have one of the few members of Congress who actually has a degree in engineering, got a mechanical engineering degree from Northwestern, got a degree in engineering economic systems from Stanford. My wife actually was a math major in college. And so have a lot of experience for myself and her. And I was very happy to hear what Mr. Garf was saying about training of TAs, because certainly TAs, when I was an undergraduate, I don't think they were trained very well to teach. And when I was a TA, I went on to grad school and got my PhD in political science, actually turned over to the dark side. But I wasn't trained. And I think that is really critical to do. We need to do more of that, because that's where you lose so many. You go to calculus class and go to the TA, go to class with the TA, and the TAs just cannot teach, and just really students lose interest at that point. But I want to focus on Ms. Collins here and on the what her institution does. First of all, what would you have to say about the role of your institution in educating undergraduates who transfer then to a four-year institution to complete their bachelor's degree in science and engineering? I mean, how do you go about doing that? How do you especially try to prepare them for this?
At community colleges, we have primarily two types of students, if I can make it that simple. Career program students ultimately interested in gaining skills so that they can become employed after an associate degree. And then our other population is what we consider primarily transfer students, and those are the students we are preparing to transfer to four-year institutions or higher degree granting institutions. We provide many resources for the students at Moraine Valley Community College to help them succeed. And we do use funds from a variety of sources to ensure that there's tutoring, academic assistance through academic advising, and also to help with remediation. It is an issue at the community college, probably more so than at the large universities and the smaller liberal arts colleges, that students come in and are in need of remediation for math and science. Oftentimes the high school students in particular that wind up at the community college, they're there because they've chosen that intentionally, or they end up there for other reasons. And oftentimes they don't have the amount of the level of science or the years of science that students planning to go to the university have. So we have to address that right off the bat. And what I've found to be an extremely useful effort is the collaboration between the teachers at all levels and those conversations. And as we were talking about how the National Science Foundation can help, I believe in collaboration. I believe that we should get institutions together, we should get math teachers together, we should get science teachers together, and we should really talk honestly about those issues. We were a little nervous bringing our math and science teachers in a couple of years ago when we wanted to have this conversation. We thought it would go much like, oh, it's their fault. No, it's their fault, because no one really wants to take any blame for remediation issues. And what happened was a really profound and enlightening conversation between educators who really care about students, who really care about their success. And since then, we've developed programs to work on preparing students in high school to take entrance exams, to take placement tests, we've worked with our high schools to develop bridge science courses that help them prepare and come to Moraine Valley so that they can assume that position at college level and then successfully transition on to the four-year school. All of these efforts are about collaboration, and I'll speak to collaboration over and over, but it's also about energy, and it's also about good educators caring about the students. We also try to develop 2+2 programs. We have developed a few where we work with the universities. I'm an advocate of that seamless education. I work with the high schools, I work with the four-year colleges, and how I work with them is to understand the curriculum and where we meet and where we need to better meet. And those conversations are always, always beneficial. Most of the time it comes down to math when we're gearing up towards an agreement, and most of the time it comes down to calculus. So we're working now to help prepare our students at Moraine Valley to be able to transfer to a university and do better at calculus. So.
Very good. And if the I'm relying on the chairman here to close this down, so we can get to vote. So I'm gonna keep going until he does that.
Go right ahead, Dr. Lipinski. We'll let you know when
Okay.
when you got to run to vote.
The in your testimony, Ms. Collins, you described Moraine Valley's involvement with the NSF Advanced Technology Education Program. What do you see is the particular strength of this program, and is there anything that you would recommend for changes to it?
Our ATE Center is very successful. In the past several years, we've trained over 800 faculty members throughout the country in areas of IT security and wireless and other emerging technologies. So the teacher training component of it is very successful, and it's an excellent model that should be replicated. I would definitely like to see those efforts in the other areas of STEM that took on that flavor, because that has been hugely successful. Some of the issues that we have pertain to money or budgetary issues, and working with 6 other institutions as we try to spend the money. Those kinds of conversations between and among institutions can be complicated, as we all do things so differently. But we figure out a way, and the programs that we develop are certainly worth the effort and the headaches we have at times. But we will continue to challenge ourselves to spend that money and learn how to do it in a consortium-like atmosphere.
Okay, thank you. I think probably should I'll wrap up my questions here. Thank you all very much, and thank you all for your testimony.
And we do thank all of you for your testimony. Thank you for taking time to be with us today. We appreciate your testimony and look forward to continuing to work towards solutions on this challenge. It's particularly gratifying having the opportunity to chair the research subcommittee, which authorizes the budget of the NSF, to hear that earlier resounding note of approval of the NSF's work, and that's very encouraging to all of us on the subcommittee, and I'm sure encouraging to the people at NSF. There being no further business to come before this hearing, the hearing is adjourned.